560, The Answer.
Your next news update is at 8 o'clock. Continuous coverage of news, traffic, and weather at 560theanswer.com. Now more of Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by the Money Hour radio show, Saturday afternoons at 3 on AM 560, The Answer. Brought to you by Pearshell Financial Group.
Tickets for Freedom Summit Chicago are on sale now at freedomsummitchicago.com. That's freedomsummitchicago.com.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So, Overstock.com CEO Patrick Byrne stepped down yesterday after 20 years heading that very successful online retailer because, in part, you have to assume his relationship with imprisoned Russian spy Maria Butina was exposed by Sarah Carter. She's an analyst you often see on Sean Hannity's show, for example. But he went on in this wide-ranging of sorts interview on Fox Business to talk about his involvement with the FBI in 2015 and 2016. That he had previous relationships with some FBI agents, professional relationships, because he helped them solve the murder of a friend of his many years ago. He had helped them with some investigation into Wall Street wrongdoing around the time of the Great Recession. And he was somehow engaged with them at or about the same time he was having this relationship with this imprisoned Russian spy who was also having a relationship with some former board member of the NRA. I mean, I know this sounds like Tom Clancy or Jean Le Carré novel, but this is what we know to be true. And he suggested that he came forward out of duty to expose what will soon be exposed by AG Barr's office, question mark?
The bottom line is the big cover-up. There was political espionage conducted against Hillary Clinton, Mark Rubio, Cruz, and Donald Trump. And this isn't a theory of mine. This is some political position. I was in the room when it happened. I was part of it. I thought I was doing law enforcement. Sorry.
So he was inadvertently helping the FBI spy on those 4 campaigns. He was in the room, he said. Right. But he was unwittingly doing that because he later found out that the orders that he was following were being given by Peter Strzok giving those orders at the behest of unnamed individuals, A, B, and C, even though he names A for Andy McCabe.
I realized that these orders I got came from Peter Strzok, and as I put together things, I know much more than I should know, and it's right to keep silent. This country's gone nuts, and especially for the last year, when I've realized what I know, every time I see one of these things, somebody drives 600 miles to gun down 20 strangers in a mall, I guess I feel a bit responsible. So I have to come forward. I went to see my rabbi, and you know who my rabbi is, right? Mm-hmm. Who's my rabbi? Who's my rabbi, David?
Tell us, Patrick.
It's this guy in Omaha, and he said, Patrick, you come forward. He said, you can't let this sit with the feds. Let the feds do their job. You have to come forward to the American people. So I am. I never heard of the guy. I only figured out last summer who had sent me these requests. It was a guy named Peter Strzok. And he was doing it on behalf of 3 officials. I'm just identifying now as X, Y, and Z. They were named to me, and I've identified them to law enforcement. I believe there's a massive federal investigation that is going to turn up that there was political espionage conducted through a number of different venues against Hillary Clinton and against Rubio, Cruz, and Trump. I know for a fact. I know other people who were involved.
He also suggests that, though he won't name the party, someone offered him a $1 billion, it's like Dr. Evil, $1 billion bribe to not come forward, to stay silent. Okay, we need some help making sense of this, if there is sense to be made, and I can't think of a better person than Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor, chief assistant U.S. attorney in Manhattan, contributing editor to National Review. He's got a new book out on the larger topic, Ball of Collusion, the plot to rig an election and destroy a presidency. Andy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dan. Sounds like nobody should buy my book. That it's boring compared to that.
Well,
Jeez.
You're not living the exciting life that Patrick Byrne has been living. But I mean, is this somebody who was on? I mean, nobody has covered this with more detail and commentary than you from beginning to present. Is this somebody that had been on your radar at all until yesterday?
Not that I know of. Now, there's a lot of people who've popped up who've been unidentified. And I must say, consistent with what I've said, I hope consistent with what I've said all along about the Steele dossier. I think when you hear a story like that, you should start running down the details before anybody gets too excited and runs with it. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, there's a lot more questions than answers provided. And speaking of that, John Solomon, the Steele dossier, and other documents that are yet to be made public, at least in totality. John Solomon, writing over the Hill, who's done a lot of good investigative reporting on this topic area as well, had a piece out this week talking about documents that are soon to be declassified that could rock Washington this fall. Among them, for example, he writes of the Steele spreadsheet. The FBI kept a spreadsheet on the accuracy and reliability of every claim in the Steele dossier. According to my sources, writes Solomon, it showed as much as 90% of the claims could not be corroborated, were debunked, or turned out to be open source internet rumors. And if that's true, depending on the timing of when they knew this information was false or suspect, and yet continue to utilize it to get surveillance warrants, that really puts senior leadership of the FBI in a dubious position.
Yeah, two things about that. I've been following John's reporting, which has been excellent from the beginning, and I understood the 10 items he was talking about are things that he, having followed this story as closely as anyone has, would like to see unsealed.
Yes,
and that he has some reasonable hope that they'll be unsealed. But I don't think he's saying for sure that he knows that this stuff is going to come out.
No, that's correct.
The
that's
second
correct.
thing,
yeah.
The second thing about the spreadsheet, what's always hit me over the head with the spreadsheet story, having used to write affidavits and submissions for warrants for a living. The spreadsheet is sort of something you're supposed to do before you use the information. And it seems to me that what happened here is they used the information and then they started to go, humana, because they hadn't been able to corroborate it. And then they finally sat down and said, well, let's parse this out and, take it one fact at a time and see what we can corroborate. They're supposed to do that. There's a thing that's called the Woods file. They're supposed to verify and corroborate this stuff before they use it. What we now know on the basis of what we've heard about State Department interviews of Steele is that they knew that he was wrong about critical facts before, like 10 days before they submitted the first application. And my beef with this from the beginning has been, number one, Steele was never a source. He was an aggregator of information. The sources in a warrant are the people who see and hear the things that you're asking the court to rely on. So they've been saying all along that they went with this information because the source was credible. Steele wasn't the source of anything. He hasn't been in Russia for 20 years. He didn't see or hear anything that they were asking the court to rely on. And secondly, he's telling a sensational story, which is of critical importance. I mean, if Trump really was a Kremlin tool, that's a major, major problem for our country, right? So this is the sort of thing that you go out and corroborate before you run to a court and rely on it. And here, they knew that he was wrong on basic things. When a witness is wrong on basic things and is telling a sensational story, that's when you put the brakes on everything and go over every single thing he said and make sure that you can back it up before you use it in court. And these guys just not only tootled over to court and used it without being able to corroborate it, they went back 3 more times over the course of the next 9 months.
Well, where,
So
yeah.
I find that stunning.
Well, where is Christopher Steele living right now? And do you think there'll ever be a day when he testifies in front of a congressional committee hearing?
I really doubt that. I understand he's in Britain. That's where that's where his life is pretty much located. And I think that this is really complicated, and this is a problem that I think transcends Steele. If you look at the fact pattern here, we did a lot of operating and running informants. When I say we, I mean our government, at people who were connected to the Trump campaign in Britain. A lot of this investigation took place in Britain. Britain's our closest intelligence ally. We would not operate in Britain without the Brits knowing what we were doing and being cut in on it. So I think one of the big stumbling blocks or the big impediments to getting to the bottom of what happened here all along has been the involvement of foreign intelligence services, because you have to thread that needle of, there's information that we're entitled as a country to have to know what our government was up to and whether it used these counterintelligence powers politically during a campaign. And at the same time, we have these intelligence sharing relationships that are crucial with these allied services, that if we rupture those relationships, the country is much less safe because we can't rely on having that sharing of information anymore. And I'm sure the foreign intelligence services are fighting tooth and nail, and our intelligence services are fighting tooth and nail not to expose stuff because that could rupture those relationships.
I want to go back to some of the other documents that Solomon mentioned, but also it's not just John Solomon. It's somebody that actually has the standing to force some of these documents to be declassified and thus released to the public. Lindsey Graham talking to Maria Bartiromo this week, essentially talking about whether you like Lindsey Graham's 3 lanes or Devin Nunes's 5 buckets of information. They're all talking about largely the same documents, the same information. Another topic area, a document area, Page and Papadopoulos, Carter Page and George Papadopoulos, the possibility that there was exculpatory information with respect to any accusations of collusion that was not provided in a way that you're required to as an officer of the court. And so that area as well. So, I mean, talk to that area, but then also other documents that you would like to see that you think bring this whole thing into focus.
Yeah, well, the one thing I think of when I keep hearing this is, let's see it.
Yeah.
It's been 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of hearing these guys say, and we're going to push for this, and we're going to push for that, and where is it? Look, I was a prosecutor for a very long time. When you prosecute somebody, you don't go down that road unless you're prepared to turn over to the defense. That is, to the people who can most exploit this information to the damage of the country, all of the exculpatory information, right? So Papadopoulos was prosecuted like 2 years ago. They shouldn't have gone down the road of prosecuting him unless they were prepared to turn over the exculpatory information. So if it exists, why haven't we seen it yet? That stuff should have been produced months and months ago. And I just think that, I think a number of these guys, Devin Nunes has done a terrific job. Lindsey Graham's been very strong on this. But, we hear an awful lot of, this information is coming and that information is coming and this could blow the lid off. Where is it? Where is it? I mean, come on, it's been 3 years. So I'm count me a skeptic. I want to see it first because I don't for the life of me understand. We're not talking now about information presumably that could implicate a foreign intelligence service. This is our own government interacting with someone they were trying to make a case on. And I've been convinced from the beginning that when Papadopoulos, when they took a run at Papadopoulos, particularly when they introduced the second operative, Ozra Turk, into the equation, they did that with the hope of trying to make a case on this guy. I'd be stunned if there's not a tape recording of that. And I just sit here years later or months and months later anyway and say, where is it?
He is Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, contributing editor at National Review. The book, Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency, just released. So pick